Bochrim, hello again. I hope everybody's doing, Baruch Hashem, fabulous, even under the current unfortunate circumstances. May this learning be l'schus refuah shleima to Mordechai Yehuda Leib ben Rivka and to everybody else who requires the Eibish's Rachmanis for a rapid and complete recovery. Okay, so we are going to analyze an ambiguous, surprising statement of Rabbon Gamliel. It's in the Mishnah, Masechta Psachim, Daf Kuf Tes Zayin Amud Aleph at the bottom. And you'll probably recognize it because we say it in the Haggadah. Rabbon Gamliel would say, Kol Shaloi Omar, whoever does not say these three things on Pesach, Loi Yotza Yedei Choivosoi. He's not Yotz's obligation. And the three things are Pesach, why we eat Korban Pesach, because the Eibush jumped over the Yiddish houses in Mitzrayim. Why we eat matzah. And as you know, because when we left Mitzrayim, the dough did not have time to rise, and the moror as well we eat because of the bitterness that the Mitzrayim brought upon us when we were in Mitzrayim. If you don't say these three things, says Rabbon Gamliel, you do not fulfill your obligation. And the truth is, I'm going to ask you two questions now, is, wait a second. Number one, what chayv is Rabbon Gamliel talking about? Which chayv don't you fulfill if you miss out these three things? Number two, does itaka mean you don't fulfill your chayv? Did you mamish blow it completely? In other words, question number one is, what did you blow? And number two is, how bad did you blow it? Concerning the first shaila, which chiyuv is Rabbon Gamliel talking about? So there's really two options. Option one is talking about the mitzvah of Haggadah, the mitzvah of the night of Pesach, Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. You tell over the story. So perhaps part of the details of the story you have to tell your child, or if there's no child, tell whoever you're with, or perhaps even tell yourself. Part of the story you have to tell over is that because of the detail of Hashem jumping over the houses, therefore we eat the Korban Pesach. Because of the bitterness tomorrow, and because of the story of the matzah, we eat matzah. That's option one. Option two is, it has nothing to do with the Haggadah. It's a din in eating Korban Pesach, in eating matzah, in eating moror, that you have to explain and verbalize why it is that we eat these things and what they represent. And the truth is that Rishonim on both sides over here. The Rashbats, towards the end of the Rishonim in Spain, in Africa, Northern Africa and Algeria, passed away in the early 1400s. The Rashbats has a pirush on the Haggadah. It's printed. And the Rashbats writes clearly that if you don't say these three things, you're lacking in Vihigadata. He clearly said it's part of Haggadah. In addition, the Kol Boy, an unidentified sefer from the Rishonim, there's a lot of discussion who may have written it, let's say from the 1200s. And in the Kol Boy, he also writes very clearly, in fact, he writes like this, that don't think if you eat Pesach, Matzah, Mar, don't feel so hot, don't feel like you're on top of the world. There's also a mitzvah of Haggadah, and therefore you have to say these things. He clearly said it's part of Haggadah. In addition, we have the Rambam, and it's actually quite kedai to learn this Rambam on yourselves, Bochrim. It's in Hilchas Chometz U'Matzah Perek Zayin. And the Rambam starts off, it's a mitzvah and a Torah to tell over the miracles and wonders on the night of the 15th of Nisan. And then the Rambam details exactly what you have to tell over. And one of the things the Rambam says is, he brings Rabbon Gamliel in Perek Zayin of Hilchos Chometz U'Matzah Halacha Hey, he says, whoever does not say the reasons of Pesach, Matzah, Morer, you're not Yoitze your Chayv. And at the end of Halacha, he says, all of the above mentioned things are called Haggadah. Black and white, the Rambam holds, it's part of the mitzvah of Haggadah. In fact, they say that Reb Chaim Brisker, when he would sit by the Seder, he would start and say, every night there's a mitzvah to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim. We paskin like Ben Zoyim, like Rabbi Loza ben Azariah. You have to mention Mitzrayim every night of the year. So Manishtana, what's the big deal of the night of the Seder? And it's quoted that Reb Chaim would say there are three differences. And they're all listed clearly here in the Rambam. That number one, the night of the Seder, it has to be in question-answer form. Like the Rambam writes in Halacha Gimel, that you have to make sure there's a question either from the kid, if there's no kid from your wife, if there's no wife from yourself, or if there's someone else in the room, they should ask. There has to be question-answer. Number two is Halacha Daled of the Rambam, Maschel begnus u'masayim b'shvach. The night of the Seder, you have to talk by Riches and go back to our very humble and not so proud origins, and from there end off in the more neshevach in the positive note. So you have to go through the history. And Reb Chaim said, and the third thing which is unique to the night of the Seder is the din of Rabbi Gamliel, that you have to say that because of the detail of Hashem jumping, we eat Korban Pesach, because of the matzah, the historical matzah story, we eat matzah, and so to the moror for the bitterness. So according to Reb Chaim, he clearly understood that according to the Rambam, it's literally a part and parcel of Haggadah to say these three things of Pesach, matzah, and moror. Who do we have on the other side of the coin? We have Ramban. The Ramban is in his Sefer Milchemes Hashem. It's a Sefer he wrote on the Rif to defend the Rif from the attacks of the Baal Hamor. The first Milchemes Hashem on Shas in Masechta Brachos, the Ramban has a long piece, and in it he quotes actually a brisa from Masechta Yuma, where it says that if somebody was in the Azara or near the Azara, and you say Kriya Shema together with the Kohanim that do the avodah of the earliest carbon of the day, the carbon Tamid, or you say Shema together with the Anshe Mishmar, which were a group of Yidden which were there to oversee the carbon, the Braisa in Masechta Yuma Daf Lamed Zayin says you're not Yoitze your Chayv. Because these Kohanim and the Yidden who are called the Anshe Mishmar, the supervisors, they're not saying Kriya Shema at the right time. So anyone who says it with them will not be Yoitze his Chayv. You got to say it at the right time. Now, is that supposed to mean that the Kohanim and the Yiddish supervisors are not Yoitze Shema? So Ramban says no. What it means is that they didn't say it at the optimum time. The best time is to say it after you can recognize between Tchelis and white, until sunrise. And the Kohanim would say it before you can distinguish between Tchelis and Lavan, and the Yidden, the Mishmar, the Yiddish supervisors on the carbon would say it after sunrise. So both of them said it at a b'di'evedika time. So when the Brisa says if you do it with them, you're not Yoitze your Chayv, doesn't mean literally you're not Yoitze your Chayv. You just didn't do it at the perfect time. You're lacking, but you're still Yoitze. And the Ramban then says, what's my raya? From Masechta Pesachim Daf Kuf Tezayin, where it says, whoever doesn't say these three things on Pesach, you're not Yoitze your Chayv. And says the Ramban, but you don't have to go back and eat Pesach Matzah Moror. What do you see from the Ramban? Two things. That he, first of all, clearly he's saying it's part and parcel of Pesach Matzah Moror. It's not part of Haggadah. Part of Pesach, Matzah, and Moror is to verbalize the reasons for why you're doing the mitzvahs. But the Ramban also says that if you don't do it, big deal. You're still Yoitze the Pesach, Matzah, and Moror. But they are there to enhance the reasons that we give at Pesach Matzah Mor is to enhance the eating experience, the mitzvah of Pesach Matzah Mor. So the Ramban holds it's not part of Haggadah, it's part of Pesach Matzah Mor. So too the Marsha over there in Psachim says clearly that the reasons that we give by the Seder to eating Pesach Matzah Mor, he said it's like a lishma. And in other words, it's to enhance the mitzvah of eating the matzah and the mor and the Pesach, to have a proper kavanah in the mitzvah that you're fulfilling. You should verbalize and say clearly the reason why you eat them and what exactly they represent. And there's an interesting Mashro who explains why it's necessary by these mitzvahs more than other mitzvahs. We're not going to go into that. In addition, I would say Tosfos on Kuf Tezayin Amud Aleph in Psachim, he says that, Tosfos is saying, how do you know that you have to say the reasons for Pesach? Because it's a pasuk in Parshas Boy. If your children ask you what's the Korban Pesach about, Va'amartem, you should say it's a Zevach Pesach. You have to tell them it's a Korban Pesach because Hashem jumped over our houses. And Tosfos says it means you have to verbalize. You have to say the reason why you eat Korban Pesach. And so to Matzah and Mor, says Tosfos, because Matzah and Mor are compared to Korban Pesach. Now, when looking at this Tosfos, it seems pretty clear that the verbalizing the words is connected to the mitzvah of Pesach Matzah Mor, not to Haggadah. Why? Because if it's part of Haggadah, so just because part of Haggadah is to tell the reason for Korban Pesach, how do you know to carry that over to Matzah and Mor? They're compared to each other? They're only compared to each other as far as mitzvahs which are directly negea them. But if part of Haggadah is to talk about Korban Pesach, how does Tosfos know for sure that part of Haggadah is to speak about Matzah and Mor? It makes much more sense, l'chayr, to say that Tosfos holds it's a din in Korban Pesach to explain why you're eating it. So if that's the case, then for sure, being that Matzah and Mor and Pesach are compared to each other, based on the pasuk, by the way, of Al Matzah and Mor Yerchlu, Morim Yerchlu, you should eat the three together. So once Matzah and Mor compared to Pesach, it makes sense. If part of Korban Pesach is to explain the reason, then I can drag that over to Matzah and Mor as well. So l'chayr Tosfos goes together with the Ramban and the Maharsha. Okay. When it comes to the second issue we asked, which is, how bad did you blow it? So l'chor is also machlekes, right? So in other words, even after we've already sorted out, there are a couple of Rishonim who say that part of the Haggadah is to explain the reasons for these mitzvahs. Other Rishonim say no, part of the mitzvah of Pesach Matzah Mor is to explain the reasons. But the question is, okay, but if I don't do it, how bad did I blow it? So, this is the second issue. So it also appears to be a machlekes. The Ran in Psachim, on that Gemara over there, it's a famous Ran, short, and he writes like this. When Rabbi Gamliel said, you're not Yoitzi your Chayv, he says, Koloimar, you're not Yoitzi your Chayv Kara'ui. You're not Yoitzi your Chayv, Visadarv to Zayin, appropriately. But to say you're not Yoitzi at all, he never meant. He didn't mean that. And he brings a raya. The Gemara in Sukkah, Daf Chav Ches Amud Aleph, it's a Mishnah, Beisham and Beisil debate, if you have a kosher sukkah, but your table that you're eating from is outside the sukkah. Beisham says it's a problem, because if you're leaning over to get food, you might end up eating with your head outside the sukkah. Beisil says it's okay. And the Mishnah there says that Beishamai would say to somebody who ate in a sukkah in such a fashion with the table outside, that you were not Mekayim mitzvah sukkah ever, if that's how you ate. So says the Ran, if Beishamai would say to somebody who ate in such a sukkah with a table outside, you were never Yoitza sukkah, it can't be you mamish never Yoitza. Because the whole issue is maybe you'll stick your head out and you'll eat with your head out as well. But Minat Torah, if you didn't do that, you're perfectly fine. So it must be, says the Ran, that there as well, they used a sharp lashon, but it just means you didn't do a great job, but you were Yoitza. So too over here, Rabbi Gamliel says you're not Yaitse. He just means to say you didn't do a great job. You're lacking in your performance, but you were Yaitse. Similarly, the Ritva on that Gemara in Sukkah Daf Chavches says exact same thing like the Ran. He just starts with the Gemara in Sukkah and says that when Beis Shammai says you're not Yaitse, he doesn't mean you're never Yaitse. Of course, it's a good Sukkah. It's just you didn't do it properly. Karotzen Chachomim, says the Ritva, and the Ritva cross-references, and he sends us here to Psachim, and he says, just like Rabbi Gamliel, never meant to say that if you don't say these things, you're not Yaitse. He just meant to say you didn't do the greatest job. It's not perfect, it's imperfect, but you're still Yaitse. Interestingly, Tosfos in Sukkah Daf Gimel Amud Aleph does write concerning that story of Beis Shammai with the sukkah, with the table outside. Tosfos Taka says there that Beis Shammai would tell someone that you're actually not Yos at all. The Chacham completely invalidated such a sukkah, and even if you had your head inside and ate, the very fact your table was outside would make the sukkah posel, null, void, cancelled, gone, and you're actually not Yos to the mitzvah at all. But the Ran and in Psachim, the Ritva and Sukkah say, no, Beis Shammai was just being harsh and sharp like they were, but you are Yoitz, just you weren't Yoitz in the ultimate fashion because you went against the desire of the Chacham. Fine. And so too they say over here by Rabbi Gamliel. Another source we can bring in is the Gemara in Brachas Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph says if you don't say Emes V'Yatziv in the morning or Emes V'Yemuna after Shema in the evening, you are not Yoitze, you're Choiv. So the question is, what does that mean? If you don't say the bracha after Shema, you're not Yoitze, you're Choiv. Which Choiv? The Choiv of the bracha? Well, obviously you didn't say it. Which Choiv? The Choiv of Kriya Shema? If you don't say the bracha in a Yoitze Kriya Shema? So the truth is, Rav Hai Gon Taka holds that. Rav Hai Gon holds if you don't make the brachas on Shema, the Chachamim invalidated the Shema. You're not Yoitze Shema. But if you look in the Tur in Siman Samach Vav at the end, the Tur quotes the Gemara from Brachas, and he says, when it says Lo Yotze Yidei Chayv, it means you're not Yoitze the Chayvus HaMitzvah Ketakana. You're not Yoitze the mitzvah the way it's supposed to be. But definitely you're Yoitze Shema, because the bracha would not hold back you being Yoitze the Shema. So what's the Tur saying? That the Gemara means if you don't say the bracha after Shema, you're not Yoitze. What does it mean you're not Yoitze? Says the Tur, you're not Yoitze Shema in the optimum fashion. You could have said it with the bracha afterwards. It makes the Shema so much more beautiful, and we don't even know what it accomplishes. If you don't do it, you're still Yoitze Shema. So that would be another source that Lo Yotze Yidei Chavasa doesn't mean literally, it just means in the optimum fashion. So we have a Ran, we have a Ritva, maybe that Tur as well. And the Ramban we mentioned before, the Ramban in Brachas said clearly two things. And he said, number one, the reasons of the mitzvahs is part of the matzah, the Pesach, and the Morah. But he also said, if you don't say it, no, you don't have to eat the stuff again, you're still Yoitze. So the Ramban clearly says that it's only lechatchila. If you don't do it, you didn't blow it. And like the Ramban also quoted from that Bryce and Yom about saying Kriya Shema with the Kainim or the Yidden who are supervising the carbon, that when it says you're not Yoitze, it doesn't mean you're not Yoitze, because those people were. Yeah, but they said it at a b'di'evedika time. So the Bryce means you weren't Yoitze in the ultimate fashion. So do we have any Rishonim that take Rabbi Gamliel's words literally? So l'chayra we do. If we go back to the Rambam that we quoted before, the Rambam writes in Perek Zayin of Chometz Umatzah Halacha Hey, he quotes Rabbi Gamliel the way it is. If you don't say these words, you're not Yoitze Yidei Chavasa. And some Achronim want to be medayik. The fact that the Rambam quotes it the way it is means he doesn't learn like the Ran and the Ritva and the Ramban, that it's just to sweeten, just to fatten up, to enhance and beautify the mitzvah. It seems from the Rambam, if you don't do it, you blew it. You're not Yoitze. So, for a long time, I was under the assumption that these two machlokesen are actually dependent on each other. The machlokes of point A, of which chiv is Rabbi Gamliel talking about, and the machlokes of point B, of how bad did you blow it, would one would lead to the other. How's that? And I always thought it was very pashut. If you learn it's part of the mitzvah of Haggadah, that means on the night of Pesach, you have to tell over the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So if part of the story is to say that because Hashem jumped over the houses, Yid Korban Pesach, and because of what happened with the Yidden and the Matzah, we eat Matzah, and because of the bitterness, we eat Morer, so therefore if you're not going to say it, you're lacking in the mitzvah of Haggadah. It's like having 3 parashas in Tefillin. You can't have 3/4 of a mitzvah or half a mitzvah. A mitzvah has to be a complete entity. If you're lacking part of the mitzvah, you're not going to be Yotze. Whereas, if you learn that it's a part of Pesach, Matzah, and Morer, so what that would mean is like what Tosfos said that we quoted before, Tosfos on Kuf Tes Zayin, on the Mishnah of Rabbi Gamliel, that there's a mitzvah to Korban Pesach. While you're eating, there's another mitzvah of Va'amartem to tell your kids while you're eating it. It's like a mitzvah on the Gavra that you should fulfill while you're doing the mitzvah of Pesach or Matzah Morer. But if you don't, so okay, you missed out on that detail, but you don't have to eat Matzah, Pesach, and Morer again. So that's how, and if you learn like that, it actually stacks up really well. The Rambam, it's supposed to come out, fits like a glove. Because the Rambam clearly writes it's part of the Haggadah, like we said before, and he seems to clearly take Rabbi Gamliel's words literally. And the two things go hand in hand. Being that part of Haggadah is to tell Avodim Ayinu and to tell over the Gnus, where we began and where we ended up, the whole arichis of the history. And you also have to say these 3 things. If you don't say them, you're lacking part of the mitzvah of Haggadah. How are you going to be Yotze? You fulfill 2/3, 3/4, shkayach. It's like 3 parashas in Tefillin. It's like missing some strings and tzitzis. Until you reach the end, you haven't been Yotze. But the other Rishonim will say that if you don't say it, nish gefährlich, they may very easily learn it was a mitzvah which was connected to Pesach, Matzah, and Morer, but it's not going to hold back the mitzvah, just like we don't have other mitzvahs that if you don't verbalize the kavanah, it will be ma'akiv the mitzvah. You don't have that anywhere. So over here as well, yeah, l'chatchila you should say it. V'amartem zevach Pesach. But if you don't say it, it's not going to hold you back from being Yotze the Pesach Matzah Morer. So the Rambam comes out perfect, and the Ramban comes out perfect, because the Ramban in Brachas, said also, he said both things. He said, number one, it's connected to the eating of Pesach, Matzah, and Morer to say the reasons of why you're eating it. And he also said that if you don't do it, no, nish gefährlich, you don't have to eat it again. And the two things also go hand in hand. It was a kind of superimposed chiv on top of the eating of the Matzah and the Pesach and the Morer. You should explain it. But if you don't, it doesn't take away the fact that you ate it and you're mekayim the mitzvah. And in fact, the Rashbatz in his Pirush Haggadah writes clearly that number one, if you don't say it, you're lacking in Vahigadata. And he writes clearly, you're not Yotze Vahigadata. And he doesn't give any, he quotes from Gamliel as it is. And in fact, in that little paragraph he has, he quotes it twice. He says, you're not Yotze Vahigadata. Why? Because it's part of telling the story. If you didn't say it, you're missing part of the story. How are you going to be Yotze? So everybody would stack up fine. Interestingly, Tosfos, because over here we're saying that Tosfos holds that the mitzvah of telling over is connected to the eating of the Pesach Matzah Morer, and therefore we said if you don't do it, no, you still ate the Pesach, you ate the Matzah, you're still going to be Yotze, like the Ran and the Ritva, etc. But it's interesting because in the case of Sukkah, where the Ran and the Ritva are quoting from, Tosfos himself holds there, as mentioned above, that you're actually not Yotze, min ha-Torah. So it's interesting. In Sukkah, where it's only an issue of the Chachamim, yet Tosfos holds the Chachamim can invalidate the entire mitzvah. Yet here, where Tosfos holds it's a doraisa to give the reasons, it's not going to invalidate the eating of the Korban Pesach, the matzah and maror, that would make Tosfos quite inconsistent. It'll be ibchum mistabra. But the truth is, it's not a kasha. You can answer very simple. When it comes to Beis Shammai and the Sukkah, Beis Shammai were worried that you'll stick your head out and you'll eat from the table outside the Sukkah and you won't be Yotzeh. So to safeguard the mitzvah of Sukkah, they have the right to play with the mitzvah and invalidate it in certain circumstances because it's for the sake of the mitzvah. Mashenken here, there's a mitzvah to eat the Pesach matzah and maror. There's a separate thing to talk about it while you eat it. The two things are two separate dinim. So therefore Tosfos would say, if you miss one, it's not going to affect the other. So everything seems to come out great. Until I came across a Ramah. And when I came across this Ramah, the whole world just fell apart around me. And that is in Hilchos Pesach, in Siman Tov Ayin Gimel. It's actually, the Ramah is in Darchei Moshe, his Pirush on the Torah. At the end of the Siman, the Ramah says like this, he quotes a Ran, and he says like this, the Ran says, whoever doesn't say these three things on Pesach, you're not Yotzei your Chayv. Says the Ran, that's mitzvah min hamuvcher. But Yedei Haggadah miyu yotz, you're still Yotzei Haggadah. Now that it does not say in the Ran that we have. The Ran does not say by us that he learned as part of the Haggadah. Fakert. Our explanation was that the Ran holds like Tosfos, the Ramban, the Marsha, it's connected to Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. And that's why if you don't say it, you still Yotzei the mitzvah of Achila. Fakert, we said that the Rambam and the Rashbats, anyone that holds as part of the Haggadah, if you don't say it, you blew it. And all of a sudden comes the Ramah and he's mixing everything together and he's quoting from the Rangar. And he says, again, I'll read it to you again. I'm not making this up. Take out a tour if you have it. Darchei Moshe, the end of Siman Tov Ayin Gimel, he says, he quotes the Ran, if you don't say these three things, when Rabbi Gamliel says you're not Yotzei, it means you're not Yotzei mitzvah min hamuvcher, but you're still Yotzei Haggadah. So he learns it's part of the mitzvah of Haggadah, and yet if you don't say it, you're still Yotzei. So mamash, it blows everything up. It puts everything on its face. Throws everything on its face. I didn't get it. For years I was mistaken. My whole life I was under a false impression. And by the Chayre, there's a kasha in the Rambam. If it's taka part of the mitzvah of Haggadah, so then if you don't say it, how could you be Yotzei Haggadah? So l'chayre, the beer is like this. So far we discussed two issues of Rabbi Gamliel. Number one, which chayv is he talking about? Number two, how bad do you actually blow it if you don't say these things? But there's a third issue, which is the fact that you have to say it, is that midoraisa or is it just midorabanan? There's a well-known shaila. Let's just digress for a moment. If the Torah wants a certain mitzvah to be fulfilled, and the Chachamim come and they formulate the way the mitzvah should be done, if somebody does not do it in the ways the Chachamim formulated, but what they did l'chayr is enough for the Torah, are you Yotzei min ha-Torah? Or do the Chachamim say it's our way or the highway? So the Pri Megadim raises this issue in his Psicha Klaus, a general introduction to Shulchan Aruch. One of the sources which are related is the Tosfos we quoted above, Sukkah Daf Gimel, that Tosfos holds according to Beis Shammai, if you have the sukkah, if you have the table outside the sukkah, although min ha-Torah it's fine, the Chacham can invalidate the sukkah so much so that it's not a sukkah anymore, and they can say that you won't even be Yotzei min ha-Torah. Another source which is Neigeya is the Rabbeinu Yoin in the beginning of Masechta Brachas. It says by Kriya Shmu v'Shach b'cha, you got to say it at night as long as you're lying down. which means the mitzvah goes the entire night. That's the shita of Rabbi Gamliel. But Chacham hold until Chatzos. So the question is, and Rabbi Gamliel doesn't say you should have do before Chatzos. Do Chacham not hold the b'diavad you could do till the end of the night? What's the debate? So there's a whole shagasari about this. In Siman Daled, the Rabbeinu Yoina, in the beginning of Brachos, is quoted as saying that, it could be according to Chachamim, once Chatzos comes, you can't fulfill the mitzvah anymore. It could be Chachamim uprooted the mitzvah from after Chatzos. Even though Minat Torah you can go till the morning, the Chachamim can say till midnight, and afterwards we don't allow you to say it, and if you do, it's worth nothing. We have the power to cancel it out. So this is an issue the Pri Megadim raises, and it deserves a shir on its own right. Many Achronim disagree. The Avnei Nezer has kashas on it. But there are interesting sources going in both directions. Interesting, when it comes to Kiddush, Minat Torah, Kiddush Friday night, you just have to say some words. Just to mention some words that sanctify Shabbos and make it different from the other days of the week. But we know the Chachamim came and said you got to do Kiddush al Hayayin on a cup, and Kiddush have to be b'mokum suda. Some hold, by the way, that the wine is deraisa. Some hold mokum suda is deraisa, but most hold it's just a derabanan. So the question is, once Chachamim came and said you got to say Kiddush on a cup of wine, you got to say Kiddush right before you eat. So then if you just say words, which originally Minat Torah would have sufficed, is it still adequate to be Yotzei Minat Torah in such a fashion? Or do Chacham come and say, no, it's our way or the highway? Well, in Hilchos Kiddush, the Magen Avraham and the Alter Rebbe, in his footsteps, paskin, that Friday night when you say Mekadesh HaShabbos in Shul, or wherever you daven, when you daven Ma'ariv Friday night, and you say the middle bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos, you're Yotzei Minat Torah. So does that mean that they disagree with the Pri Megadim's idea? Lav Davka, could be Kiddush is different for numerous reasons. But one simple reason is similar to the logic we said before in Tosfos. When it comes to Kriya Shema, or when it comes to Tosfos and Sukkah about the table outside the Sukkah, the Chachamim were worried. They were worried the mitzvah itself may suffer. The person may stick his head and eat outside the sukkah. Chachamim were worried by Kriya Shema, if they're going to leave the mitzvah the entire night, we'll all fall asleep. Yeah, I'll wake up at 2 a.m., of course, and we'll sleep through the entire night. So Chachamim were worried the mitzvah itself may suffer. So to safeguard the mitzvah, they have the power to say that we're going to tamper, and we're going to cancel it over here for the sake of the mitzvah itself. But when it comes to Kiddush, Minat Torah, you could say words. What was the Chachamim's issue? What, they had a problem with that? Elamai, they were masakin. They wanted to beautify it, enhance it, do it on wine, do it b'makom suda, and they found sources for each thing. But it's a takon of the Chachamim to enhance the mitzvah. Why should they come and say that if you don't do it our way, you're not going to be yotzei? Why should they tamper with the fulfillment of the mitzvah? There's no concern that the mitzvah may not get fulfilled. It's not the same as Kriya Shema by Sukkah. So if that's the case, there's no stira between Kriya Shema and Sukkah and the case of Kiddush. Well, being that's the case, what about over here by Agadah? If the Ramah holds that the mitzvah of Rabbi Gamliel, of saying the reasons for Pesach, Matzah, and Morah, is only a din d'Rabbanan, so Minat Torah, you don't have to say it. Chacham came and said, we want you to say the reasons of Pesach, Matzah, and Morah. So then even if it's part of the Haggadah, if you don't say it, Chacham aren't going to say it's our way or the highway. Why should they? Just like the Pri Megadim may agree by Kiddush, and for sure according to those that don't agree with the Pri Megadim in the first place will hold that if it's just a Hisaf or the Chacham, if you don't do it, of course you're going to be Yotzei. Even if it's part of the Haggadah. So if so, the Ramah doesn't destroy what we said before. In the beginning we were assuming it's Deraisa. Like Reb Chaim learns in the Rambam, like Taisa says clearly, then if it's Doraisa, then we had a Taina. If it's part of Haggadah, then it's like a fourth parish of Tefillin. If you don't have it, you won't be Yotzei. But if it's just an addition of the Chachamim, if you don't do it, no. So the Ramah must understand that it's a din d'Rabbanan. Where did Ramah get it from? Maybe from the very fact that the Ran compares Rabbi Gamliel's case to the Sukkah case, and he says by both of them, when we say you're not yoytze, it just means in the ultimate fashion. By Sukkah, it's definitely a rabbinic issue to have the table outside the Sukkah, as long as your head doesn't go out. The fact that the Ran compares the two may be a proof that he holds us to Rabbanon. But either way, the Ramah for sure holds us to Rabbanon, according to what we're explaining. And that's why he says, Chachamim added it to the mitzvah of Haggadah, but if you don't say it, don't worry. So Lefizeh, we can actually look at the Alter Rebbe and Siman Tofayin Gimel, Sif Mem Gimel. The Alter Rebbe says like this, and we'll finish with this. The Alter Rebbe says, the main Nusach Haggadah, the Chachamim Masakin as an obligation on everybody, is he counts. What do you have to say midrabanan? Avodim ayinu. You have to speak about the gnus and the shevach, and then he says you have to say Pesach, Matzah, and Mor, etc. It sounds like from the Alter Rebbe that Pesach, Matzah, Mor is a din d'Rabbanan. Where do you get that from? How does Alter Rebbe know that? Tosfos says it's a din d'Oraisa to say it. The Rambam may hold us d'Oraisa too. Where did Alter Rebbe get it from that it's only the Rabbanon? So the Cha'ira, maybe, Kula Haiva Ulai, we can say that it was clear to the Alter Rebbe from this Ramah. Because the Ramah holds saying these three things is part of the Haggadah, and if you don't do it, you're still Yoytze Haggadah. But if it's Doraita, it's like lacking the fourth parsha in Tefillin. It must be the Ramah holds only the Rabbanon. So that could be with Alter Rebbe God, that it's taka only the Rabbanon to say these three things. Bachrim, sei gesund.